Sergei Alberkovich, longtime friends of the Kyiv Post. And as we stretch into the second month, actually third month now, of the pandemic and the lockdown, the casualties are mounting, of course. First of all, is loss of life. More than 550 Ukrainians have died and nearly 20,000 are infected. Along with the health costs and the loss of life are the economic costs that are mounting. Some businesses are doing well, some businesses are treading water, but others are looking at a very unhappy prospect of consolidation and liquidation. And that's why we're brought here together to talk about the issues that many companies are facing in their businesses now. The economy shrank in the first quarter in Ukraine 1.5%, but that is expected to shrink even further. So a lot of difficult decisions facing by companies, a lot of issues that we hope to raise today in this seminar.
Brian, stop. У меня через 26 секунд начнется стрим. Нет?
And so it's okay. This happens. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the experts who know so much more about these topics and how we can navigate the difficult economic times ahead. So Max Lebedov is the head of private clients, corporate law, and M&A practice for Go Law. I turn the floor over to Max. And before I do, I want to say that we welcome questions. Those of you who are watching live stream, just send us the messages and we will get them to our expert lawyers. Thank you. Max?
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for your kind introduction. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with you and with all the Kyiv Post team. Thank you all for joining us today. It's raining today, so I think that it's the best time to turn on our online seminar because it will be very interesting, I believe, for you. Today we have amazing team of our speakers. I will be talking about the corporate consolidations and reorganizations in general. Also, we will have Irina Kalnitska. She will present tax implications of the process. And at the end, we will have our counsel, Taras Litovchenko, and he will be presenting key features of the liquidation process. And since we have online streaming, you can send the link to your colleagues or friends and ask them also to join, because I believe that each of you will find at least a piece of very interesting and important information for you. And because we all live now in very different world with the new rules, in very unpredictable circumstances. And it all forces us and force shareholders, management, and all of us to think about things that we have never even imagined. And this brainstorming shall be positive. It is very hard to improve the business when somebody is negative and complaining. And, we always complain. In Ukraine, it's like a national art of Ukraine. We complain about the politics, we complain about taxes, about prices, about the traffic jams, but the positive way to think about this is to try to find the solution to minimize the disruption to your company or to a group by reviewing its corporate structure. And this is the topic of our today's seminar, corporate restructuring. Corporate restructuring is the process of improvement of the structure of a business or a group, mainly consisting of financial restructuring and corporate reorganization. In Ukraine, we have several forms of corporate reorganization. These are merger and acquisitions, divisions, separations, transformations, accessions, and liquidation. And we will focus mainly on these last two, accession and liquidation. I'm sure that majority of you are aware that the global crisis of 2008 led to restructuring, or at least was one of the reasons for restructuring for many European and global companies. And among them are such well-known companies as Air France, Airbus, ArcelorMittal, IKEA, T-Mobile, and others. And you will also find the link on the slide, and you can follow and see the action plan for restructuring of those companies, also the outcomes of this restructuring, and how the process was established, which is pretty also interesting. So the best way, I think, to see how the corporate structuring works is through the case study. And I think also it will be good to give you a bit more understanding about the process. And it also will create some ideas in your mind that will be related to your specific company. Next slide, please. So internally, on the slide, you see the first experience, the first real case. This is internal corporate restructuring of Japan-based multinational company Sony Corporation. And in 2008, in aftermath of the global financial crisis and the global breakdown, a bit more background information and the reasons. In 2008, Sony incurred first full year of operating losses since 1995, amounting to $1 billion in annual loss. Also in 2008, Sony annual sales were going down by 13%. And the projected losses for 2010 were $1.2 billion. So it was really impressive. So as you see, the restructuring process consisted of several points. And the first was very interesting, and the most important is the corporate simplification. Basically, they reduced the 5 business groups to 2. Also, they closed 11 manufacturing sites, and they reduced also the workforce. This is a usual also instrument during the restructuring process. And as a last point, they also consolidated the management of the company under one single decision maker. And the results were impressive. Cost reduction by more than $3.5 billion. They increased cash flow for $3 billion. And also the operating income was $400 million. And just to remind you that the projected losses were $1.2 billion. So it's really a good example. Next slide, please. Next case is Ukrainian experience. Is restructuring of Astarta Holding. Basically, that was a restructuring of one of the segments of the business. That was a dairy cattle husbandry cluster. And this also included the company simplification and basically the consolidations of certain items. For instance, they consolidated farms. They liquidated the small farms, which were unprofitable at that time. And also, they a bit realigned the workforce in these farms. And the results are also good. As you see, cost saving by 15%. Approximately, that was amounting to $60 million. And they also increased the production of dairy. So you can see that the reasons for restructuring can be different. Next slide, please. But we pointed out the major one that obviously will be relevant for any company. First, the reason is the financial improvement of the company. Usually it includes also the tax optimization, the closing of intragroup debts, separation and liquidation of non-core businesses. Second one is the need to establish a proper and transparent structure for attracting investments, or maybe for attracting finances. Also, this is expansion of or reduction of a business and establishment of effective management. So these are the major reasons. But we do have also additional reasons. This can be a partial withdrawal of assets. This can be asset protection. Maybe you have a necessity to reduce your staff. or the management thinking about or worrying about their responsibility for the bankruptcy. So these also can be, you can find these reasons appropriate to start the corporate restructuring. But we do have also really interesting and new reasons that also very connected with Ukrainian legislation and Ukrainian reforms. These are beneficiary disclosure requirements and also implementation of base erosion and profit shifting plan. And the part of this plan is implementation on controlled foreign corporation rules. What does it mean? Disclosure of beneficial owners. You know that all legal entities are obliged to disclose the beneficial owners. But now, according to the last amendments that were also adopted some time ago, now there is also the requirement to file the notarized copy of the passport of the beneficial owner. For some of the owners, or even for international companies, it's not so easy, to get this document and to file it to Ukrainian authorities. Also, if you have a corporate shareholder in your structure, you also will be obliged to provide a copy of the corporate documents, of legalized documents for this company. It's also not so easy, time-consuming, and quite complicated in certain aspects. So probably this can be a good reason for you to start this corporate restructuring. Second slide, please. In relation to the BEPS and controlled foreign corporation, on the beginning of 2020, our parliament adopted amendments to the tax code of Ukraine, which provides the requirement and basically the rule that the beneficiaries will be liable for paying personal income tax that on the amounts of the non-distribute foreign companies' profit. And this can be very interesting and very problematic for some of the Ukrainian owners of the businesses, because this will attract additional taxation in Ukraine and also disclosure of those companies. That's why maybe some of the Ukrainian residents will be thinking about the restructuring or maybe changing the shareholder structure of their group of companies. Next slide, please. Actually, from our point of view, we think that accession and liquidation can be a very nice solution for certain companies. That's why we decided to focus on these two main types of restructuring, of reorganization in Ukraine. Next slide, please. So what is accession? In Ukraine, it's called приєднання. It is a termination of one company and transfer of its assets and liabilities to another company. So basically, as a result of this liquidation, one company will be terminated, and the assets will be transferred to the other company. When we use accession, first of all, this can be when valuable assets or trademark or licenses or belong to different companies, and there is no commercial point to maintain all these companies. Second, it can be, for instance, when one of the group of the companies is profitable and the other is unprofitable. And then from tax point of view, it can be very beneficial to merge those companies and at the end to optimize the tax base. And this will be also presented by my colleague Irina a bit later. You can find other reasons why to use accession, but to explain to you how it works, I also would like to share with you the structure of usual accession process. Next slide, please. So how it looks like. For instance, we do have LCA with a sole shareholder A. Then we have LCB with sole shareholder B. And in this particular case, LCB will be terminated, and all the assets and liabilities of LCB will be transferred to LCA. And as a result of this transaction, balance and amount of the authorized capital of LCA will be adjusted, and at the same time, shareholder B acquires corporate rights of LCA. From the first point of view, it looks pretty simple, but believe me, this process is rather complex, and you will have a lot of interesting complication during the whole this process. Next slide, please. In this regard, you need to think about specific features of the process, and we will not, give you a full understanding of the process because it will take a couple of hours. But to point it out the most problematic issues, we can do that right away. So first is the correctness of transfer of assets and liabilities. You need to understand that the company B that will be liquidated in our case can have, for instance, real estate that should be transferred to another company. It can have also movable assets, other liabilities. So in this regard, you need to think how to do that smoothly and with no complications. In this regard, I would recommend to have proper legal due diligence in advance. Second is tax implications. In this regard, obviously, you need to have tax audit to evaluate all the tax implications of this transaction. This also will be presented by my colleague. Compliance with corporate and antitrust legislation. We will have another slide with the requirement of the Antimonopoly Committee of Ukraine that can be related to this process. Next one is renegotiation of the contracts, franchise and lease contracts and others. Obviously, that the company will have some kind of contracts, and probably some of them can be terminated, some of them can be transferred to other company. So in this regard, and maybe even the terms of these contracts can be changed because the provisions or the obligations of the party provides the necessity, to renegotiate of certain items, of certain terms of the contracts. So it also can be somehow addressed by the preliminary corporate reorganization plan. Then regulatory related issues, permits, licenses, and related things. Obviously, some of the permits will be terminated on the date of the termination of the company. Some of them can be transferred to other company. So you need to think whether you need to evaluate whether your business will not be influenced by this process and whether the permits will be properly transferred to other company. And the last issue, but not the least, is the issue related to the dismissal and transfer of the employees. You need to understand that automatically employment contracts will not be terminated, and they will continue. And that means that if you are thinking about reduction of the workforce, you need to think how to do that properly, and definitely you need to notify the employees about this termination in advance. Next slide, please. A bit more about some of the points already mentioned. Merger clearance from the Antimonopoly Committee of Ukraine. Accession and the merger can be deemed as a concentration according to our anti-monopoly legislation. And that means that this transaction can be carried out only obtaining prior the approval from the Antimonopoly Committee of Ukraine. We have certain criteria mentioned in the law that related to the total profit and total value assets of the company that shall be met to go through this process. So you need also to mention and not overlook this, because it's a usual problem, that at the end you faced this problem that before starting the exact restructuring process, you need to wait a couple of months to receive this permit from the Antimonopoly Committee of Ukraine. Next one, please. Employment issues. As I mentioned, in the case of reorganization, the employment contracts of the employees are not terminated. Termination of the employment contracts can be done only in case of reduction of the number of staff. That's why, obviously, you need to think about this properly. If you want to leave, if you want to have your employees transferred to other companies, can be done very smoothly with no problems. If you want to reduce or to dismiss certain positions at your company, think about that in advance and start explaining this to your employees, because transparency with your employees in this process is also very important and need to be properly and timely addressed by the company's management. At the moment, I just want I'm looking that I'm losing you. That's why I want to pass the floor to my colleague Irina Kalnitska. She is the partner of our tax department, and she will be like a genius in taxes. So she will explain the tax implications of the process. Irina, your floor. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Max. Dear colleagues, good afternoon. I'm happy to be here with you today, and it's time to talk about taxes. During this seminar, I will talk about tax consequences of corporate restructuring according to the tax code and in the absence of the specific tax rules. First, we will talk about accessing company, and then we will move to the successor. The general policy view in the most countries is that corporate restructuring shall not be subject to any taxation, because obviously taxation will discourage it. And in this regard, the good news are the following. Accession has no income tax consequences either for accessing company or for the successor. It means, in other words, that no financial differences shall apply, and everything shall be done only according to the accounting rules. These were the good news. However, there is a very important question that was important previously and still remains. It's about the losses of the accessing company and how they can be transferred to the successor. I think that you would agree with me that the top priority of any restructuring is to make business profitable. Let's assume the situation where one company is loss-making and another company is extremely profitable. The way out, how to optimize taxes and other benefits for the business, is to make accession. However, previously, the business faced a very serious problem because tax authorities denied the fact that the successor company has the right to the losses and negative income tax value of the accessing companies. However, certain companies, nevertheless, they tried to do this accession, and they even obtained the tax ruling from tax office. Not surprisingly, such tax ruling was negative. However, the company successfully challenged it to the court. And the court decision is very, very positive in this regard. Could you please move to the next slide? No, I think that's the previous one. Yeah, this one. And the previous one. Yeah, now it is the right one. No, it's about VAT, and we're still talking about income tax consequences. Yeah, this is the right slide. So, dear colleagues, on this slide, you can see the details of the court ruling. Why I decided to highlight exactly this court ruling. I really like the wording and the groundings that the court used. Actually, neither tax code of Ukraine or any other tax legislation can prevent the company from the right to the losses of the accessing company. So, in other words, the successor receives all the rights and obligations of the accessing company, including the right to the losses. So, after this court ruling, even the tax authorities begin to grant the business positive tax rulings, and some examples of them you can see on this slide. So in my opinion, this is a huge step forward that will make possible for the business to take advantage of all benefits of the accession and corporate restructuring. And now we can move to the next slide, and we will talk about VAT highlights for the accessing company first. So, good news again, accession is not subject to VAT. Moreover, the negative tax value on VAT of the accessing company can be freely transferred to the successor. And in contrast to the losses on the income tax, VAT negative tax value can be transferred to the successor according to the direct article of the tax code. So I don't think that you will have any problems with this. Important information, please pay attention on the right to the VAT refund. Accessing company may have the right to the VAT reimbursement, and only this company has such right. The right to VAT refund cannot be transferred to the successor. This is a very straightforward position of the tax authorities, and where the lawyers actually agree with this. It means that if the accessing company filed the application for VAT tax refund, then only this company can receive it. You may face the situation when, in the process of liquidation, for instance, the accessing company's VAT certificate is already cancelled. Please pay attention that it does not prevent the company to receive VAT tax refund. So in order not to have any problems with this, we will recommend to first close all the issues with tax office, to receive VAT reimbursement, to pay all tax debts, and only then to proceed with the corporate restructuring in the form of accessing, for instance. Let's move to the next slide, please. So now we will talk about income tax highlights for the successor. They're actually the same as I already mentioned. First, the successor receives all the rights and obligations of the accessing company. It means that if the accessing company has a tax debt, then the successor will be obliged to pay it. The successor receives all losses, that is the negative income tax value of the accessing company. The successor receives also the VAT negative value of the accessing company. Accession isn't subject to the VAT. And one more issue that I would like to bring your attention is the following. In the process of accession, the accessing company shall transfer its assets and goods to the successor. And there is exception to the general rule because such operation is not subject to VAT. This is a direct provision of the tax code, so I don't think that you will have any problems with this as well. The same exception is provided regarding the cancellation of VAT tax certificate. What do I mean? When some goods that were bought with the VAT tax credit are starting to be used in non-commercial transaction, according to the general rule, the company shall accrue additional VAT obligations. However, this rule does not apply to the corporate restructuring. It means that when the VAT certificate of the company is cancelled, the company shall not accrue additional value-added tax obligations. Let it be like this. So let's move to the next slide, please. On this slide, you see some very positive court ruling that actually confirmed what I have just said. And in order to summarize all this, because I understand that taxes may be a little bit difficult, but I want to point out that now our legislation changes really substantially, and all changes are only for the better. And if to sum up everything, you should remember that first, accession and corporate restructuring are not subject to value-added tax. No tax consequences in terms of income tax. Everything shall be done only according to the general accounting rules. Losses and negative income tax value can be transferred to the successor. Negative VAT value can be transferred to the successor. The right to VAT reimbursement has only the accessing company, and all the issues with tax office shall be completed till you decide to implement your corporate restructuring. This will substantially save your time. This is briefly about tax consequences of the accession. And now I would like to pass the floor to the Counsel of Go Law, Taras Litovchenko, who will tell us about liquidation, why it may be beneficial for the business, and what peculiarities you should take into account.
Hi, Irina. Hello, everybody. I'm very glad to be here today with you. Next slide, please. So, liquidations. First of all, don't think about liquidation as something negative. Indeed, it can be a very positive thing where you can choose to liquidate some companies of your group that you don't require anymore. As Max had already told earlier, liquidation is an integral part of any accession procedure. At the same time, the liquidation can be regarded as a separate form of business reorganization. Next slide, please. Basically, there are several major types of liquidation. Among them are voluntary liquidation and the liquidation through the bankruptcy procedure. Main determination of the kind of the procedure you will follow is based on the financial standing of the company. That is to say that if the company has enough funds to settle with its creditors, then you can follow the voluntary liquidation, which is initiated by the shareholders of the company. At the same time, in case the company has not enough funds or assets to deal with its creditors, then you will need to go to the bankruptcy procedure. I will just add that the bankruptcy procedure is initiated either by the director of the company or by the creditors of the company through the court. Next slide, please. I think it is pretty clear for everybody that the liquidation is mainly aimed on wind up of those companies of the group that have only loss-making units or productions, that have not a financially viable state, or that have no prospects for future recovery. Of course, it's not an extensive list, and other reasons may apply in each case, but still these are the main ones. Next, please. So now I will tell you a few specific features which we have worked through on our extensive practice of liquidations, including our recent experience in Ukraine. First of all, I would like you to understand that any liquidation is a long-lasting process. It may take from 6 to 12 months or even more in case the complications during the process arise. Secondly, you have to understand that the law imposes an obligation on you to inform your creditors as well as debitors on the liquidation procedure, about that it has started already. This means that you have to send formal written notices to every of your creditors and debitors. And in case of debitors, you need to also to require them to pay all the indebtedness to your company, as well as to return any kind of property or assets that belong to the company but may be used or possessed by third parties. The law requires you also to initiate court hearings in case this is not done properly without it. Another thing to mention, and I believe every one of you understands, that the most complicated part and maybe the most time-consuming part of the liquidation process is the tax inspection. I mean, undergoing tax inspection. I have to admit that on our practice we had almost no cases when the tax inspection went smoothly, when we had no additional accrual of taxes. Of course, in those cases we had pretrial proceedings as well as court hearings on the cases, but still I would recommend you to always engage professionals in this process to avoid any possible negative consequences for your business overall, as well as for the company specifically. The last but not the least thing to remember is the process and the regulations on dismissals of the employees. The law establishes a requirement for the company in liquidation to notify the employees about the future dismissal 2 months prior such dismissal. Furthermore, in case you have a possibility or an opportunity to provide another workplace for these employees at another company of your group, you shall follow that possibility as well. This will help you to avoid possible claims from your former employees in the process of liquidation. Next slide, please. So to sum up what I have mentioned, I would like to point out the case law, and it just confirms that the matter of notification of the creditors is of very high importance, and you have to strictly follow these rules. Otherwise, there are precedents that show that courts can even cancel the registered termination of the company in the Unified State Register and return the company back to the procedure of liquidation. Furthermore, of course, everybody understands that any claims of creditors during the process of liquidation may be a complication to the process, as well as may extend the timelines of the process. Now I will pass the table to Irina, who will add some more information about taxation during liquidation.
Dear colleagues, let's talk about liquidation. I believe that the key tax aspect in liquidation is the tax audit, because everything else is very understandable from my point of view, and you can easily read it in the tax code. That is, for instance, you should notify tax authorities about your intention to liquidate company in advance. Then tax authorities are obliged to conduct tax audit. And actually, in this regard, there are very specific terms for this tax audit. But you should pay attention to the following fact. Unfortunately, in reality, when you do not expect tax inspectors in your office, they will definitely come very, very fast. On the other side, when you want them to come and you really is limited in time because you want to liquidate the company as soon as possible, you can wait for ages for this tax inspection. So you should take it into consideration. Liquidation tax audit is carried out according to the general rules of the tax code. So in other words, you will have the ordinary unscheduled tax audit with all the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages of this process. What do I mean? Actually, you should be very carefully prepared for this. During this tax audit, tax office will check everything. They will check the activity of the companies during the last 3 years. And if they find something special that they do not agree with, of course, this tax audit will be ended up with tax notice decisions. And here we come to the very important part of this liquidation audit. I'm more than sure that the probability to receive not to receive the act as a result of such tax audit and not to have additional tax obligation is very, very minimal. So you should be prepared to challenge such tax notice decision to the court or in the administrative proceedings. And in this regard, you should take into consideration the following. First, you have two options actually. The first one is to agree with this additionally charged tax obligation and to pay them. The advantages of this process is that everything will end very, very fast. However, you will need to pay additional taxes. And the other option is to challenge such tax notice decision to the court. The advantage is that in the majority of situations, I believe that you will win these court proceedings and all additional tax charges will be cancelled. However, the disadvantage is the time. I believe that in general, 2 instances of court trial will last up to 2 years. It's extremely long. And I believe that if you are limited in time, this will not be acceptable for you. What to do with this and how to avoid these long-lasting court trials with the tax office? We strongly recommend to prepare for this liquidation tax audit. Why it is important? You can conduct your own tax audit before tax authorities will visit you. What are advantages of this? First, some tax advisors or lawyers can check the same documents and the same activities, commercial activities that will be checked following by the tax office. If some discrepancies will be found or some documents are not in the full compliance with the law, everything can be corrected. And you will have the time to change it, to correct it, to amend it, and to be fully prepared for the tax audit. This will first help you to minimize time for the subsequent challenging the tax notice decisions, and the second, it will help you to avoid additional tax charges at all. That is why we highly recommend this. Also, you should take into account the following, that tax authorities will never approve your liquidation balance sheet, and they will never press this information to the state register until you pay all your tax obligations. It means that if you have some court trials with tax authorities, for instance, in the Supreme Court of Ukraine, that was opened like 3 years ago, but it is still in the process of consideration, you should finish it. How to do it is a very good question, and I believe that it's better to ask the representative of the tax office how to do it. In our practice, we had similar situation, and we signed the amicable agreement with the tax office in the case that was in the consideration of the Supreme Court. So you should anyway find the way out from this situation. No trials with the tax office, no tax debt. All the branches shall be closed. That is also very important. If you have some overpayments of the tax, you can set off it with your tax debts, but it depends on the particular tax. I believe that the best recommendation will be to be prepared for the tax audit, and then everything will pass very, very smoothly, and you will avoid lots of troubles with this in the end. So on this slide, you see the main highlights that you should take into consideration while preparing for the liquidation. And I believe that now we can move to the conclusions of our seminar. And I will invite all my colleagues. We will have Q&A sessions and we'll provide you with the major takeaways.
Okay, so now we have three of us, and we will be happy to answer your questions. First, we received a question about the definition of the beneficial owner. And yes, we do have the definition provided by the anti-money laundering legislation. First of all, it's pretty, like interesting definition because it's not so clear as usual. But at least the person is an individual needs to have 25% or more shares in the company. But also the definition provides that this, regardless of the formal requirements of control, this person can have a right to influence the company, to influence the decision making of the company, or to vote, or has a right to vote on the general meeting of the shareholders. So definition is pretty substantial, and you can find it in anti-money laundering legislation. The second question is, but the important thing is that the agent or the nominal holder of the shares cannot be the beneficial holder. Next question: can you talk about real examples where antitrust was enforced in a non-political issue? If you are talking about the obtaining prior approval for the concentration from the Antimonopoly Committee, I need to say that it's pretty straightforward procedure, and the violation in this regard are very usual. So, and the Antimonopoly Committee will be very happy actually to attract additional penalties for the players in the market. So I think that you will find a lot of examples, and we do have these examples in also in our cases. So it's pretty usual situation. What is the situation regarding losses in loss-making Ukrainian branch of a foreign group subject to a merger? it's not so clear to me, but I think that you're referring to the Ukrainian subsidiary having losses. Yes, obviously, this company is subject to a merger, but you need to think with which company you would like to merge this Ukrainian subsidiary. If you're talking about the foreign company, so no, it's not possible to merge Ukrainian company with foreign company. If you're talking about Ukrainian branch as a representative office of the international company, also it's considering that Ukrainian branch is not a legal entity, so it's not possible to merge because it's just a part of the legal entity, foreign legal entity doing the business in Ukraine. Then we have questions for Irina, please.
Which one? Please give your recommendations to taxpayers how to make tax audit and liquidation comfortable, efficient, and fast. It's a very interesting question. How to make tax audit fast and comfortable? I think that tax audit cannot be comfortable at all because it's tax audit. But our first recommendation will be to properly prepare for this. As I already said, we strongly recommend to conduct your own tax audit, during which you have the opportunity to discover all the shortcomings of your primary documents, some other small violations probably of the legislation, and you will be able to remedy them and to correct them. And in such case, you will leave almost nothing to tax inspectors, and you will be able to minimize your possible tax obligations in the future. This will be our main recommendation, I believe.
And maybe just to add that our initial idea actually was to, and we requested a meeting, and we asked the representatives from the tax office actually to participate in our discussion today. We asked for a couple of heads of the tax audits departments in the tax office to join us today and to answer very interesting but and problematic questions from our side. But unfortunately, maybe considering that recently the management of the tax office was changed several times, and the same happened, I think, with the heads of the department. That's why maybe they refused to come and to speak and to answer your questions today.
Probably these representatives are changing so fast and so frequently that they have no chance to prepare for the seminar.
Yeah. We do have another question about taxes.
What obstacles, difficulties arise for taxpayers in the liquidation procedure related to the approval of the liquidation balance sheet and deregistration in the tax authorities? Well, I will tell you a little bit more. Actually, as I already said, the liquidation tax audit is the same unscheduled tax audit that the company may face during its commercial activity. And in order to receive the approval, let it be like this, of the liquidation balance sheet, the company needs to settle all tax obligations. And if we're talking about this tax audit, so in our practice, what are the most frequent violations of the legislation, or what we can distinguish? I believe that it depends on the commercial activity of the company. For example, if we have pharmaceutical company or agriculture company, then of course I need to highlight all their marketing services that such company usually hired from the providers. Why it is like this? Because all the marketing services, as well as supply contracts, for instance, and construction contracts as well, they were always and still remain under the very specific attention from the tax office. I mean a sham transaction or unreal transaction. So when you do not have the enough set of primary documents, and you do not have a real reports according that can prove the reality of the provided services, you will definitely face some problems. So again, it depends on the commercial activity and on the particular transactions. One more issue that is that always attracts attention from the tax office is the operations with non-residents. For instance, payment royalty abroad or non-payment royalty abroad. If your company uses trademark in its commercial activity and the trademark belongs to the parent company abroad, And for instance, according to the internal policy in the group companies, no royalty can be charged in such situation. You will definitely have problems with tax office, because our tax office believes that if Ukrainian branch uses trademark for free, then Ukrainian tax office will charge you additional tax obligation in the form of royalty, and they will calculate it in a wonderful way. They will take 4% of your turnover from the previous year. It's a ridiculous approach from our point of view, but still I think that this may be a problem, so you should pay attention to these transactions as well. Also, we remember about beneficial owner of the passive income. So if you pay interest abroad, again, royalty abroad, some operations with software, we're talking about value-added tax, whether it is royalty, whether it is provision of services, all such transactions are under special attention from the tax office.
Great. But I have very interesting additional question in this regard. The question from the audience: is my understanding correct that no tax audit is obligatory within the accession process?
No, your understanding is not correct, actually. Accession, liquidation is a part of accession, because the accession company will be liquidated in the end. It means that you will have this tax audit anyway. Whether it is accession or it is liquidation, tax audit is obligatory, so you should be prepared for this.
Yeah. Great. Taras, we have on other channel, we have interesting questions, and probably you will be able to answer. Has liquidations and consolidation gotten easier over years, or how so?
From my personal
Are you
point of
happy
view,
with the current process?
I wouldn't say so, because still you have to make everything on paper. You cannot do majority of the issues online. The communication with tax authorities is still on quite a low level, I would say, and you still have to beg them to help you in the process. So, in my opinion, no, the process has not much changed for these past, I believe, 7 years.
Okay.
That's it.
And what about the time frames
The time frames of what?
of liquidation or accession?
The timelines of liquidation would constitute approximately from 6 months in case everything is okay, to a year in case there are minor complications, and more than a year in case there are real difficulties. So it depends. It depends on the business.
Okay.
But I believe that we should say to our audience that irrespective of such a minor disadvantages in general, any restructuring, especially accession, is beneficial for the business, given only the tax benefits.
Yeah, I mean, the restructuring can be different. It can be quite simple things, yeah, and can be very complicated process also. But even this complicated process can be very beneficial at the end. And usually for international and big companies, it takes a couple of years, so it's not a problem, it's a process that you need to follow, and at the end you will get the results.
And today we're talking only about accession and liquidation, but
Yeah.
there are so many other possibilities how to restructure your business properly. And I think that in each given situation, we can consider all the pros and cons, and we will definitely find the most beneficial solution for your business.
Yeah. Another question, are you seeing a wave of consolidation and liquidations because of the coronavirus? Yes, we do. First of all, I need to say that the topic of today's online seminar actually was somehow created by the audience, by our clients, because we received a couple of requests from international companies thinking about the liquidations of not profitable companies in the group. Also, some of them consider accession several companies in one company. So we thought that this is the right time for this seminar, and so we do feel that it's a real opportunity for some of them to use this kind of restructuring. And secondly, we think that even without coronavirus, it's also
a useful tool
it's a
to
useful
handle your
instrument.
business.
Yeah. Irina, for your question, tax office leadership changes. What's the effect?
What's the effect?
Do you feel something?
Yeah, we have the very straightforward effect. Nobody comes to our seminar, unfortunately. I'm not sure that I can comment on this right now. I think that everybody knows or should understand the real reasons why the head of the tax office, the head of the custom office were changed. So it's more about politics, not about tax office. But I can only hope that taxpayers and business will finally see the real positive changes, because during the last year, personally, I cannot say that something dramatically changed for the better. I do not see such changes. And this draft bill 2010 that Max today mentioned regarding the foreign control companies, this draft bill is still under the consideration of the president, and nobody knows whether he will sign it or not. There are different point of views on this situation. So I hope that with the change of the head of tax office, we will see some light in the end of the tunnel.
Okay, great. And whether you mentioned, because I saw one of the questions to our tax people about the mutual agreement maybe with the tax office within the process of accession or the liquidation, whether it is possible, to speed up the process, to ask the tax office somehow to collect their the forces, and to assist somehow to the taxpayers within this restructuring, because at the end, the positive result for the taxpayer is a positive result for the tax office, because at the end they will get more taxes paid.
Yeah, I will agree with you, and I understand your question. Actually, on practice, everything is possible. If we're talking about large taxpayer, in our practice, we had a case on liquidation of the large taxpayer, and we have a very long tax liquidation audit, but it ended up very successfully for the company, so no additional charges. And each large taxpayer has its own administrator, let it be like this, in the tax office, and this is the person with whom you should cooperate, and this is the person who you should persuade to cooperate with you and to help you to go through this process very smoothly. Because I don't know, probably something already changed from administrative point of view, but we faced lots of technical problems. For instance, in order to a finished tax audit, you should sign the special list, and this list shall be signed by different tax departments. And unfortunately, tax office do not have enough employees to do this very fast and in time. That is why the taxpayer shall help tax office to do this in time. So there are lots of practical small problems and issues, and yes, it is absolutely possible, I believe, to talk about this with the representative, with the administrator of your companies in tax office, and to ask them to help you to do this as fast as possible.
Yeah. Great. Can we have our presentation, please? And probably we can have our key takeaways and our recommendations from Go Law in the process of accession or the liquidation of the company. First of all, I need to say that obviously you need to go through a legal due diligence and tax audit, internal tax audit made by the professionals, by the financial advisors that will evaluate the current situation with the assets, with the liabilities, and also will identify all the problematic issues, and probably also will be able to fix some errors in your documentation. Secondly, you need to develop a proper reorganization plan. This is the plan, with all the details of the process, with all the stages, with the deadlines for each stage, with the result of each stage, and you need to follow this reorganization plan. Then to check whether the company is a participant of any litigation. It's also not only tax litigation, but also maybe commercial litigation on probably some of the our enforcement bodies will also will be happy to open a criminal investigation. I don't know about that, but also it's also real life, and in Ukraine you can have all kind of challenges. And you need to keep constant communication with your employees. As I said, starting from the beginning, if you decided already that you need to go through this process, you need to notify the employees. Maybe start with the management or with the heads of the departments, then to go down. But you need to make this information more transparent, and this will exclude the gossips, in this process, because the people will thinking that you are liquidating, you are closing the business, you are doing something wrong. This information will be spreading in the internet, and then maybe may have even negative influence, on the PR activity of the company. So you need to think about this. It's very important, and maybe even to look through the NDAs and to ask your employees to follow the requirements of the NDAs with the employees. And probably you need to have proper financial advisors, because this is the most important thing. Start with the financial restructuring, then to have proper legal advisors to think about the legal nature of the issue. Maybe even to have advisors from the management point of view, how this can be, how this will be, to have implications on your business, on the management, on maybe on relations with the shareholders and with other investors, because it's also very important. And we had actually one question. It wasn't clear for me, but it's somehow related to the bank as a lender of this kind of the borrower that will go through the process of accession. So in this regard, obviously, if you have contract with the bank or credit line at the bank, you will need to look at the requirements of this credit line. But I know cases when if the process of the accession, for instance, will be very beneficial for the business, and the lender, the bank, knows who will be the beneficial owner at the end, the bank will approve this transaction, because they need to have the good client with the good standing, with a nice profit at the end, and this will, give them an opportunity to pay actually the credit.
Actually, everything depends on the credit agreement. According to the general rule, any corporate reorganizations are prohibited without written consent of the bank. So if there is no such provision in the loan agreement, and the creditor is in the process of accession, the debtor is in the process of accession, the creditor will be one of the creditors that have the right to receive the performance of the obligation. So the successor will be obliged to perform this obligation, because the successor receives all the rights and obligations of the accessing companies. So according to the general rule, no problems shall arise. However, in practice, if we're talking about the really huge credit, I believe that such accession may be one of the attempts of the borrower to avoid the repayment of the loan.
And we have another very interesting, I like this kind of questions. What do you think about selling a company to an individual in a territory not controlled by the state of Ukraine as a way of quick liquidation? It's an amazing solution, actually. I know that you can find this in the internet, and it's very quite popular now. First, it's not the solution. It's you are just moving the problem a bit away, maybe, and this will be, you will face another challenges in the future, because at the end the company will not be liquidated. At some point of view, the tax office will come to the company and will go through all the previous years, and probably the previous manager will be also somehow attracted to this, involved in this process, and also will be somehow invited by the tax office to the tax interview.
Actually, this is a very high risky kind of special liquidation, so-called. We know about the cases when the previous managers were indeed brought to liability for breaches that happened during the time when they were appointed, and indeed the company wasn't liquidated despite the intention.
I mean, they will just change the name, they will change the management and the shareholder, but at the end the company will not be liquidated. that means that the history of the company will be the same, and if the company is somehow involved in very like gray, transactions, you will face the problem a bit later. But they will come to you, I'm sure. Okay, so it was quite good discussion, I think, and we had quite interesting questions. I think that you enjoyed, and hopefully we'll have a chance, to address another interesting and complicated, because it's one of the very complicated transactions actually. So it's really not so easy to explain this kind of issues. Even online. We also you can see on your screen our social media. You can please join us, subscribe, and we will be happy to assist you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleagues.
Thanks.